Kuttner.
You know, the basic problem here is that Wall Street, despite having been totally disgraced by events, still has an enormous amount of power in the Obama administration as much as in the Bush administration before it. If you look at the fine details of the latest Geithner scheme for trying to rescue the banks, it gives a tremendous amount of power to the least regulated, least transparent financial institutions in the whole system, private equity and hedge funds. It tries to bribe them to make another round of speculative bets on underwater assets. This is exactly backwards, and I'm going to make a couple of predictions here. I think Geithner's probably gone within 60 days because he has become a liability to the administration. And I think the real question is whether Obama and his political advisors are going to have the wit to realize that they hired the wrong team. There's a whole other cast of people who are every bit as technically competent and brilliant as Larry Summers or Tim Geithner, who believe that you need a Reconstruction Finance Corporation that would take control of these entities and put auditors who work for the U.S. government inside them and sort out what's really going on their balance sheets, break them into manageable pieces, figure out how much of the loss the taxpayer takes, how much of the loss the bondholder takes, and get the financial system up and running again. And what's really interesting is that the people who have espoused this view run the gamut from Paul Krugman and Joe Stiglitz and Nouriel Roubini. That's predictable, although Roubini is not particularly a progressive. He's just very knowledgeable. But then you've got Republican conservatives. You've got the American Enterprise Institute. Alex Pollock, their expert on this, testified the other day that the TARP is completely flawed as a strategy for fixing this. You need a Reconstruction Finance Corporation. The conservative president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, Thomas Honig, gave a terrific speech on why an RFC is the only way to go. A guy named Rajan Cohen, who was a lawyer for the very Wall Street investment banks that are negotiating with Geithner, whose name was briefly floated as Deputy Treasury Secretary, he's in favor of an RFC. So I think you're going to see this view crystallizing that TARP is a completely flawed approach, and don't forget that the money that is being used to bail out AIG is TARP money. The whole approach of letting the same culprits who created this mess keep their jobs and throw money at them and use speculators to bet on the distressed securities is just catastrophic. And the only good thing about the AIG mess is it's shedding a spotlight on the fact that this is a political failure, and maybe now some people will start understanding that it's a substantive failure as well.
Ralph Nader, what about this issue of saying contracts cannot be broken? These were contracts. First of all, we haven't seen these contracts and actually what they say. But what about, for example, the UAW? When the GM is in trouble, they say the UAW has to break their contract and come up with a new one.
Well, first of all, you're right. These contracts should immediately be disclosed. You know, if the government owns 80% of AIG, why doesn't the government control AIG? It has refused to go on the board of directors. It's refused to exercise their shareholder rights as owners. They can get these contracts. And second, contracts that reflect unjust enrichment or fraudulent conveyance can be set aside. I mean, that's established U.S. law, and Andrew Cuomo, Attorney General of New York, has alluded to that. Thirdly, what's going on here is the collapse of a model of corporate capitalism that has destabilized the world and damaged workers, peasants, people, pension funds, people's savings all over the world. And the Congress is not looking, as Bob said, at the bigger picture. For example, there are 8,000 credit unions in this country. They're financial organizations, not for profit. Not one of them has failed. None of the assets, which total $1 trillion in these credit unions all over the country, where 85 million Americans do business, 85 million Americans, none of the assets have been depleted. Instead of looking at the model of the credit union as a financial institution or other models, all they're doing is throwing hundreds of billions of dollars down rat holes with ill-conceived rapid weekend bailouts of outfits like Citigroup and Bank of America and urging more and more mergers, more and more concentration of power in fewer corporate hands, not even using the words antitrust. This is really an anarcho sprawl of people in Washington.
Ralph Nader, we're going to have to leave it there.
That don't know what's going on.
I want to thank you both for being with us, Ralph Nader and Robert Kuttner with the American Prospect and with Demos organization, with Demos in New York. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report, as we move on to a breaking story. The International Committee